Plume. I hereby decree that you have now risen to the position of sainthood by the authority of the Archspawn of the 13th Age. Ether announced to a chamber filled with royals, advisors, nobles, and aristocrats. Plume looked into his eyes confidently, smiling up at him. Ether had insisted on doing her sainting ceremony in place of conviction, and Plume was pleased he had. She wouldn't have bothered with it if Ether hadn't asked her to. Ether stared at her with pride. Rise, Master Plume of Wayowen, High Combative Mage and Saint of the 13th Age. As commanded, she rose, lifting her draped robes from the floor. The fabric was a fierce scarlet, a color that mages traditionally wore, but there were also intricate religious designs embroidered in white silk thread down the back and sleeves that were typically only seen on the white thobes of priests. Plume's ceremonial garb would forevermore serve as a reminder of her titles of Protector of the Realm and Guardian of their religion. Caught in the thrill of the attention, Plume flashed a smile at the crowd. They cheered and applauded. Tim screamed in support from the front row, and she blushed at the High Architectural Mage's encouragement. Her ceremony occurred in the same hall where Ether had delivered his speech during the Festival of the Wyvern, and it was prepared to host a major banquet. Once the applause concluded, servants brought out dozens of dishes and platters. Plume and Ether joined Tim and Lime at their table. "Congratulations!" Lime said enthusiastically. Tim nodded. "I'll have to treat you to a morning meal again in celebration." "Thank you," Plume said. "This is all too much, but I was convinced that it would be amusing to have another party, especially tease up some of my newfound free time." "Yarrow's not keeping you busy enough? Or your special task from High King Panite?" Ether asked. "I'm making good progress on both, but neither is enough for a full day's work. Yarrow gets annoyed with me after 2 turns of the suns, and then I politely excuse myself for the day. And I don't always pursue the other task, but I think about it constantly. I should revisit the woods soon, though." "I wish I had free time," Tim griped. "Every waking moment since the mage's audit, I've been hurriedly studying your spell tomes. This is my first break. But is the High King not having you establish yourself as the High Combative Mage before you leave?" Tim asked. "I'm glad to hear about your studies. In terms of my role, no, the crusade party should be here in half of a turn of the moons, and leave as soon as I had an idea of what to do." Tim frowned. "That's a shame." "It's for the best, a bit less disruptive." Plume grabbed a slice of roasted goat steak to add to her plate. "Disruptive is your normal course," Ether joked. Plume rolled her eyes. "Only when it's necessary. Besides, I've asked the combative mages for general details about how they typically operate. On the road, I'll concoct plenty of disruptive process improvements for when I return." "That's our Plume. I wouldn't expect anything less." Tim popped a couple of sour grapes in his mouth. "You could have a lovely vacation while you're traveling, but you're going to fill it with work." "The crusade is the beginning of my career as the High Combative Mage, not a vacation." Tim shrugged. "Doesn't hurt to enjoy yourself a little before you reach the northern front." "Are you looking forward to seeing the different kingdoms?" Lime asked. "I am. I've never been to the central northern or northeastern part of the realm. I haven't been told our rendezvous location, but I imagine I'll see a good deal of Sylvain and Wojet. Perhaps I'll request the aid of the Mages College if the situation becomes too dire." "Good luck enlisting a bunch of masters that are too wrapped up in the theory of their manuscripts to apply it to a realistic scenario," Tim said skeptically. Lime glared at him. "Oh, don't be so negative. I'm originally from Wojet. It's beautiful. You'll love it. When the crusade is over, I highly recommend visiting the floating cities. Silk weaving is a spectacle there." Based on Lime's Wojetan clothing, Plume had guessed her heritage, but she dipped her head in gratitude for the suggestion. "Before I go, I was planning on putting on a display for the servants, since they missed it at the audit. If you have an opening in your schedule, Tim, we can tack on a lesson," Plume said. "I'll probably be too busy. You'll just have to teach me when you get back, which means you'll have to live through the Rhysogly." "What, you think there's any chance I wouldn't?" "I don't know. I've seen Rhysogly around Athlia from time to time, but they're the ones that live peacefully with us, living off purchased blood. If I were to meet a bloodthirsty Rhysogly in combat, I honestly don't know what I'd do." "I don't know if I remember seeing a Rhysogly before." "Helan Gon roams the halls occasionally, and our window overlooks part of the marketplace. I sometimes see another one out shopping before the sunrise, when I'm getting ready for the day," Tim said. I've been worried about that creature. It looks as though it was attacked the other day. And that's what you get when our species are at war, Ether said. We aren't at war with the Rhysogli as a species. We're just fighting against a select faction that has broken the treaty, Plume said, annoyed with his generalization. Increasingly, Ether had made comments that weren't like himself. They had irritated Plume, but she wasn't sure if that was just because he was in a foul mood or dealing with something more serious. Anytime she asked him about it, he didn't say anything had been wrong. He merely apologized for his careless remark and carried on. Previously, she had thought he had finally stopped being an entitled spawn, but now Plume wasn't so certain. She hadn't understood the status of the relationship in weeks. Everything seemed to be slipping away from her. Ether hadn't even seemed interested in finishing the spell tome he had worked so hard to learn. He would read something else or work on his next sermon during their evening meetings. He had wounded her by casting aside their mutual effort. She had to learn the science behind the magic before teaching him, and befriending Yarrow to learn neurobiology was her least favorite pastime. She had been so excited for Ether to succeed in earning something for himself for a change. She thought it would be gratifying for him. But abruptly, he had stopped caring about it. It broke her heart. She knew she shouldn't take it so personally, but she did. A part of her felt like she didn't know who Ether was anymore. She had also anticipated talking to him further about the dungeon apparition, but hadn't because of his peculiar behavior. To her surprise, she found herself desperately wanting to go on the crusade. Time apart will be favorable for me. I need to withdraw from this terrifying castle and enjoy the light of the suns longer than a stroll outside. Perhaps the separation will help Ether too. The day following her sainting ceremony, Plume decided to run another trip into the forest. She departed earlier than usual, and she stopped by the marketplace beforehand. If possible, she wanted to catch a glimpse of the Rhysogli to learn what the crusade would be up against. While she waited, she went to her favorite furniture maker's setup and pored over the wares. They had a new mirror. The twisted wooden sides convalesced in an intricate weaving of branches at the top and a smaller pattern at the bottom. It was beautiful more than any other piece she had seen. She wanted to purchase it, and she resolved to. How much for the mirror? A pear cut, or 500 coins. We take either. If you're paying in gem, we prefer diamond, but for you, my dear, we'll take any, the shop manager said. While she still did have enough zinc coins left over from Hayuri, she avoided making large purchases in coins. However, admonition paid her wages in diamonds. If I give you the gem now, will you hold the mirror for me until I can return for it later? She asked. Certainly. She pulled an old mine-cut from her purse and received a pear cut in return. Thank you, she said, admiring the mirror again. Thank you for your purchase. We will be here until second sundown for pickup. She nodded and stripped her eyes away from the marvelous work. When she returned from the crusade, Plume couldn't wait to purchase the remaining bedroom set, but she didn't want to spend all her gem before she left. She had no idea what she might need it for on the journey. At the other end of the marketplace, a towering figure moved in the breaching light of the first rising sun. 4 Imperial guards shielded a gray Rhysogli. She had expected Rhysogli to look more human than they did. She couldn't tell if they were male or female, or if they even had the same genders that humans did. She knew elementals didn't. The Rhysogli stood an extra cubit taller than a tall man, making it impossible to hide in a crowd when they stood on their sturdy hind legs. But the Rhysogli looked like they wanted to curl into their armored hide. Crossing their arms across their thorax, the claws remained intentionally hidden under opposite limbs. No shorter than Plume's hand, the tridactyl claws of the feet looked like falcon talons in shape, but of domestic animals in their dullness. Few humans roamed the marketplace before first sunrise, but those who did threw glares, insults, or rocks at the gray creature. The Rhysogli looked terrified, even though they had an expressionless, hardened shell for a face. The posture said so. They were doing everything they could to look as non-threatening as possible, but people still harassed them. When she passed, she smiled empathetically and waved. They ducked their head as far down as the neck vertebrae would allow and tightened the interlocking grip of their limbs, rather than risk waving a claw to return the gesture. They don't deserve this. The poor creature bears no responsibility for what has happened in the northern lands. Plume felt powerless to stop it. But I'm not. I can do something. Where she had been subconsciously concerned about becoming isolated from the other onlookers, she needed to ignore her fears. Why would I care if they don't like me, when they are cruel? She never intended to keep company with nasty people anyway. Plume established a small temporary sound barrier around the Rhysogli, so they wouldn't hear the insults while the creature plodded through the streets. But that wasn't the right choice. She dismantled the barrier a moment later. Instead, each time someone hurled an insult, she questioned them in earshot of the Rhysogli. "Piss off, scum," an onlooker said. "Why would you say that? This Rhysogli is not doing anything wrong. Why would you hurt them?" Plume demanded. "To get them to leave." "If you can't live in peace with your neighbors, you should leave instead, to a place where you have no neighbors if you cannot be trusted to get along with them." The Rhysogli's bulging eyes flicked between her and the assailants. The next person who threw a rock had the rock smashed into their own face. Plume ensured they knew she had reversed the stone's direction. "Don't throw another." "It's got armor. My nose doesn't." The rock thrower clutched at their bloodied nose and ran away. "It doesn't matter," she called after him. The Rhysogli's gaze settled on her. The guards continued, undisturbed. If it had been her place, Plume would have liked to tell them off, but she feared the social repercussions. Then again, I'm the high combative mage. I'm a saint. Why not use my titles and high social standing to help others? What's it for otherwise? She ran ahead to the guards, emboldened. "Why aren't you helping the Rhysogli?" Plume turned to the creature. I'm sorry, I don't know your name." Touched, the Rhysogli said, "I'm Belloc. Thank you for your help." "As far as we're concerned, we're ensuring it doesn't hurt the citizens of Athlia. I couldn't care less if people are throwing rocks all day long," one guard said. "I couldn't care if they kill it. It would make our jobs less demeaning," another said. "Have you no empathy? Have you no respect for the duties of your office, of the orders of your king?" "We're out here every day doing the job, aren't we?" a third guard added. "There's a far gap between doing the bare minimum and doing your job properly. Your job is to protect Belloc. If you cannot protect a Rhysogli that you're assigned to, then perhaps you should resign. If I learn that you all are not performing your duties as assigned, then I will bring it up with the High King myself." "Yeah, and why do you listen to you?" Another guard hushed him unsuccessfully, clearly knowing who she was. "I am Master Plume, High Combative Mage and Saint of the 13th Age. I am intimate friends with our resident Archspawn, and I report directly to the High King. The next time I give him a status update, I will provide him with your ranks and relay the ineffective job you four have been doing. Do not make me provide such a report. Improve your aptitude. Inform Velloc's other guards as well." At that, she nodded to Belloc respectfully and took her leave of the Rhysogli and guards. She couldn't believe she had just done that. She didn't even know how to read ranks off the guards' uniform ribbons, but they bought her bluff. Her heart thundered as she walked confidently toward the exterior gate. After the defensive mage on duty allowed her passage out of Athlia, she let the confident pretense drop. Simultaneously, she felt empowered and self-conscious over the confrontation. Conflicting pent-up energy filled her until she released a little bit of fire magic into the sky to burn it off. She controlled the flame, forcing it to fall back to the earth in the form of her little fireballs. Plume juggled them on her way to the forest, but dissipated them once she reached the line of bushes and forbs at the edge of the wood. She took in a heavy breath before she entered the newly formed forest town. To date, no one had told or shown her if they were doing anything strictly illegal, and she was coming close to dropping the investigation. As far as she could tell, they were just living the best lives they could. She went to the town's little banquet hall and received a meal in exchange for a written promise of either paying a sum of coin or contributing a labor of choice to the sustainment of the community. Given that most residents did not have spendable currency, most opted for the labor option. She would choose it for the chance to speak with more people and encounter more of their day-to-day activities and social structures. As far as she had learned, Piety was the priest of the little town, but there wasn't a proclaimed political leader. Everyone just knew their role and functioned on their own. No guards, no slackers, no waste. If she lived a different life, she would have liked the simplicity of the woods. As it was, she had far too many obligations to consider, and there were plenty of problems elsewhere that required her attention. Living among the trees would be pleasant, but it wasn't where she could do the most good, and it certainly wasn't where she was needed. While she claimed her morning meal, a group of bards sang songs she was unfamiliar with. It's impressive the town can sponsor multiple bards. That's a luxury most cannot afford. Once she sat to eat, she recognized a familiar face. The man in question had a warm and welcoming expression that was always smiling. It made him attractive for a man of his age. His hair and beard were cropped, but what remained had started to gray. His skin was nearly as dark as hers was, yet she could still make out rings of darker pinprick scars that encircled both of his eyes. "You used to run one of the furniture booths in the marketplace!" She had been so excited to see the man again. She had seen him routinely, until he had hired extra help. She believed he was the artisan behind the pieces. "I did. Plume, was it?" "Indeed," she blushed. "You have a reputation now," the kindly man said. "I don't recall your name. I apologize." "Piety." "You are the priest?" "I am." "I thought you were the artisan." Can a man not have multiple loves? Must he resign himself only to one his whole existence? That's an awfully lonely way to go through life. Interesting way to think of it. Seeing concepts surrounding the world differently is one of my pastimes, but I wouldn't be nearly as imaginative if I didn't practice creativity in my woodworking. Can I ask how you warp the wood in such a beautiful way? Do you do something to it? Heat it or soak it, treat it with a chemical? Do you grow the trees in specific shapes from their birth? An artisan never reveals his secrets. I see. Well, I love the new mirror you made. I loved it so much I bought it from the young lad who was staffing your booth today. I am pleased to hear you fancy my creations. I spend considerable energy in designing them. Tell me, Plume, what sort of work intrigued you? Piety gestured to the coupon. I have previously done water transfer work. Could I request a specific job for you? What's that? Ensuring the structural integrity of our underground tunnels. She nearly spit out the carrot she was eating. Even though she had a decent grasp of sensing structures, she hadn't noticed underground tunnels. No one had mentioned them previously, nor had she seen evidence of them. I can do that. I'm an architectural mage in addition to a combative one. You understand what I mean, then, about the dual loves. She wasn't sure she did. Plume hated being an architectural mage. She was great at it, but she would never be one again if she could help it. Still, Piety seemed excited, so she didn't bother to correct him. Where's the tunnel? They're all around town. We have a few larger meeting rooms as well. They're for hiding if the Imperial Guards ever force us back into the city. Why would they do that? As long as this new establishment pays taxes, I doubt the High King would force anyone to live in any particular place. He has larger concerns. A certain amount of work in Athlia is performed by exploiting the underclass, the same as it is in any large town or city. If certain jobs aren't taken care of because of a lack of those willing to do them, then that would cause problems for the High King and his administrators. If they become unhappy, they'll send their guards. You see the problem for us. That's terrible. That's the unfortunate reality of being impoverished in this world. The rich will enjoy the fruits of the labors of the poor, while the poor don't even get the leftover seeds. So long as the rich convince the laboring class that someone else is to blame for their plight of poverty, then the system endures. That's part of the reason I've taken it upon myself to give the poor an alternative to selling themselves or their children into slavery to feed themselves. This was all of your making? Plume asked. It was. I was sick of the illusions that society imposes on us. Illusions? Aside from who is to blame for their suffering? You're precisely right. There are a few other matters, but that is a large part of it. If you'd be kind enough to indulge me in the tunnels, I'd love to continue speaking with you on the matter, but I should return to work. They both had finished their portions. Sure. If she had been alone here, she likely would have found the entrance on her own, but she hadn't wanted to skulk about suspiciously. This way. They deposited their plates, left the banquet hall, and found a beautiful staircase leading down into the tunnel. It was wide, and the railing designs matched the other furniture for sale in the marketplace. The infrastructure surprised her. She had assumed that the tunnels would have been dug out by hand, but they were floored and lanterned too. The roughest parts were the sides, which occasionally had a root sticking out, but were otherwise smooth. Did you have a specific section that needed reinforcements, or did you want a general appraisal for the entire shaft? The latter. Touching the walls and observing the hyperbolic shape of the tunnels, the settlement did a superb job constructing the tunnel without reinforcements. But when she touched the walls, dirt had been densely compacted around them on all sides. The tunnel hadn't been dug out, but rather blasted away. Yet the soil wasn't scorched, so that theory didn't match. Magic must have been the only way to achieve such marvelous, inexplicable results. Your tunnels are pieces of art. Did you make them too, Piety? I did. He eyed her carefully as though he knew what she would ask next. Are you a sorcerer? No, but I am a magician of another sort. That makes sense, given that you're a priest. Plume assumed an angel had blessed him with the abilities of a warlock, but a priest would know the holy language and could have become a wizard. There are fewer magician priests than you would think. Tomes are expensive and time-consuming to learn. Priests never need magic for their regular duties, so it makes sense. Plume had more pressing matters to discuss. Under the hypothetical that the High King orders the return of everyone into Athlia, how would hiding in the tunnels help? The Imperial Guards would find and scour them. We have our failsafes. She raised an eyebrow. Was there something else from our previous conversation you wanted to discuss? He considered her as they wandered the halls, past closed wooden doors, and avoided the other people. Tell me, Plume, if you had single-handedly done some great deal of effort and not received the proper credit for it, how would you feel? She hadn't expected this direction of the conversation, but she knew how she felt when admonition wouldn't listen to her, and when she shared the credit for saving the castle with Master Spire, rather than with Tim. It's irritating. Piety laughed. You have a stronger spirit than I do. What does that have to do with anything? In our village, we believe in giving proper credit where it's due. We do not allow the exploitation of anyone else's gains or reputation. We believe that in every facet of our lives, including religiously. Does that mean you also follow the minor angels? That'd be exhausting. There must be thousands of them through the ages. Plume struggled to grasp Piety's meaning. We just believe in worshipping those who deserve it. Specifically, those who promote selflessness, whatever form it takes. We want to give them due credit for it. That's admirable. I'm glad to hear that. There are a great many who do not agree. Really? It's intuitive. Unfortunately, I've spoken with many fellow priests who do not preach the same. Similarly, we need to balance our worshipping practices. However, here, we can support one another and practice freely, while still welcoming anyone who would like to join our growing village. Plume appreciated Piety's perspective. We're nearly at the end of the tunnel system. Are there any issues? Not yet, but up ahead feels questionable. She quickened her pace to sense the area she was uncertain about. Something heavy pressed down on the ground above them, threatening the integrity of the tunnel. This bit needs help. If you have wooden beams pre-cut, they should suffice for the weight. She ran a few numbers in her head, and they checked out. Okay. I will cut a few to size and then have a few brothers bring them down, Piety acknowledged. Can you reinforce the section? Plume had intended to return to Athlia as soon as she finished appraising the tunnels, but she decided she could stay, especially on the chance she could see some of the rooms behind the closed doors. Piety left her to recruit helpers. Steadily, the villagers hauled beams down one by one. She would have offered to help do it herself, but the tunnel was much narrower than Athlia's massive mining shafts had been. She would have had difficulty navigating them through the tunnels. Thank you, Plume said to the two workers carrying the beam. No, thank you. This is right under my home. I am so grateful we have such a powerful mage to help us set this right, one of the laborers, a woman, said. May I ask what you have in your home that is so heavy? I have the trunks of melted metal stored in there now. Melted metal? From the profits we receive from the furniture sales, we buy metallic items. Door hinges, hangers, handles, keys, etc. They usually aren't the right size or shape for our needs, so we melt on the extras to store in trunks, use for a later date. Plume enchanted the first beam into place while the woman talked. Does Piety also sculpt the metal pieces? Oh, no. We have a talented metallurgist who guides others on how to make the equipment. Piety mostly only does the woodworking these days, the other laborer said. What did he do before? He made this whole place on his own. Plume was dumbfounded. I'd love to get my hands on a copy of his spell tomes, she muttered half to herself. The woman chuckled at the comment. We should bring down the next one, the man said. Right. Plume worked systematically with the laborers until she completed the job. It hadn't taken long. Piety stopped by to check on the progress. I thank you, Plume. You've done us a great service. If you ever store the metallic trunks somewhere else, you can use a similar reinforcement structure as the one here for a model to support the tunnel in other locations. I'll ask one of our artists to draw the diagram, Piety said. If you'll excuse me, though, I have some other business to tend to. Can I treat you to the midday meal for your help? The woman helper asked when it was just the two of them. Although Plume intended to go, she wouldn't pass up a chance to seek more information. Okay, thank you. I'm Wrench, by the way. The two women retraced the path back to the banquet hall staircase. Nice to formally meet you. I'm Plume. I know who you are, Wrench said with a smile. I heard that congratulations are in order for securing your spot as a high combative mage. I can't believe the rumor spread out here. Thank you. Can I ask what these doors lead to? Plume pointed as they passed them. Mostly additional living quarters and storage. One's a place of worship. Some are private offices. Some hold extra tools and non-perishable foods. Nothing particularly interesting, I'm afraid. Plume believed her. Oh, that's fine. I was just curious. What did you do before coming here? I was a merchant. My tale's a bit of a sad one. I trusted a bad group of people. Before I knew it, my money was gone and I couldn't afford to pay rent for my house or my shop. And I was out on the streets. I got into selling blood to the Ricicli, but enough of them fled to Kramos that I couldn't afford to support myself. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It led me to a better place, one where I don't have to worry about earning and losing coin, for I still haven't got any. Do you wish you had a chance to earn gem? Plume asked, resting a hand on the bottom of the banquet hall's marvelous staircase. Wrench climbed the stairs. I don't mind. Everything I could want or need is here. Me and the others here have a sense of community, where there had been a sense of competition for the generosity of the street folks' pocket givings. I love that I live in a place where I can contribute and not choose between feeding myself and renting a place to live. I only worry that if more people find it, we'll be overflowing with newcomers. Plume again felt reassured that the forest people were just pursuing a better life. They proceeded buffet-style through the banquet hall, and Wrench claimed both work vouchers at the end. When Plume asked a follow-up question, Wrench said, No, enough with me. I'm terribly curious about you. I admit that I had a double intention of asking you to have a meal with me. I want to know what it's like in the impenetrable castle. While they ate, Plume gave few meaningful details and spoke of trivial topics. The High King had warned Plume that someone might try to pry information out of her, that it might seem like an even exchange on the surface, but the freely volunteered particulars might be more damaging than she imagined. Therefore, Plume only gave the woman the details that Panite had okayed. Wrench did not indicate whether she was pleased or not. She simply listened. How fascinating, Wrench said when Plume finished retelling her story. I never would have guessed that's what life at the top would be like. Plume hadn't understood. Life at the top? You know everyone famous in Athlia. Actively interact with them on the daily by the sound of it. You're invited to balls and feasts, and you're privy to the High King's councils. I could never hope to experience a fraction of that. The only part of the High King's tower I'll see is its exterior tip. I wouldn't even make it past the castle's third wall, but I'm glad I can listen to your experiences. Plume reflected on her circumstances. When working under her mother in Hyeri, she had always seen herself as middle class, perhaps upper middle at best. She had just been lucky to have the skill set that the High King had needed when she was recruited to the impenetrable castle's staff. From there, she had worked hard and was recognized for her efforts. But she was only invited to the mage's audit because she had developed a rapport with Panite, even if it was a slight one. Anyone else could have done the same if they had been presented the opportunity. Are the aristocracy like what the rumors say? What did they say? Plume was glad to redirect the conversation. Everyone is either shallow or empty, that they all wear masks of illusion. The last word caught Plume's attention. Illusion? You know, everyone is something other than what they seem. No, she said reflexively. Most are sincere. Plume's mind wandered to Spire, Admonition, and Crockett. Then there was Yarrow. But then she thought of Tim, Lime, and Panite himself. Then again, there was Ether. Wrench registered the reconsideration on her face. Uh-huh. I like High King Panite well enough. He wants to do right by the realm to the best of his abilities. He's too busy to do everything, so others have to help. But again, he does his best. Does High Queen Iolite not help? Wrench asked. She's too busy raising their newborn, Plume said, scoffing at the idea. She hadn't seen the High Queen but 1 or 2 times at festival days. Even then, the Queen tired quickly from her recent illness and frequently doted on their infant son in private. Perhaps when the High Heir Apparent is older, then the High Queen will lighten his load. Perhaps. Plume didn't know anything about the High Queen, or her role in the castle. She wasn't sure why Wrench was interested. The pair of women finished their meal and parted ways. On her return trip to the impenetrable castle, an unsettling feeling rose in Plume. This sentiment didn't manifest into tangible thoughts, but left her with a sense of dread as she approached the dark granite towers. Plume had nearly forgotten to retrieve her mirror from the vendor in the marketplace upon her return. She hung it in her room and stared at herself for a long time. She looked tired. Her lingering uncertainties weighed on her. She couldn't concern herself with everything, else she would just wind herself up so tightly she couldn't uncoil to a healthy state. More than anything, she wanted to read for a few days before encountering anything or anyone. But she couldn't. She needed to confront Ether, which she was reluctant to do. She needed to explore more of the settlement in the woods. She needed to prepare for the crusade. She needed to attend council meetings. She needed to learn the position of High Combative Mage for when she returned. She needed to write letters to each important person in her life if she were to fall during the crusade. She needed to come to terms with the idea she might perish shortly after achieving her lifelong goals. It would be poetically fitting. Plume let the hysteria of the last few weeks pass and took a few days to recharge. She called off her morning writing sessions with Yarrow and her evening sessions with Ether and just sat in her room reading. Occasionally, she found her way down to the kitchens, but it wasn't often. Less frequently, she visited the training yard to keep her sorcery skills sharp. Aside from that, the only other routine she maintained was casting the reinforcement spell on the castle to stabilize its main structures. She barely spoke with anyone, opting to remain as concealed as possible. If it were up to her, she would have taken another day to skim old combative tomes, but she had finished the text she'd wanted. She had read the journal of Jalajah of the 11th Age, Ether's proclaimed favorite work. She planned to meet with him that evening and discuss the ideas the priestess had laid out. Interrupting her relaxation plans in the middle of the day was a planning session for the crusade. In the large conference room, a small gathering of people congregated. Panite, Admonition, B1 through B4, D1, Master Tempest, Master Zenith, Ether, and Plume herself. B1 began the session. When the crusade arrives at Athlia, D1 will take over from D2. The E-ranks will work with their corresponding kingdoms to review the musters and help organize the soldiers across the lines. The E-ranks that do not have their corresponding regional armies in attendance will devise their own plan of how theirs will integrate once the crusade reaches the northern border of Sylvain. The B-ranks will review each plan in their region to ensure that it will work based on logistics and each regional army's specialties and fighting styles. We will all meet again once the caravan arrives and just before they leave for A1 to ensure the proper tactics have been suggested. Plume knew that by A1, B1 had meant the High King, but she had difficulty remembering everyone else's rank. Because B1 had done most of the talking, she learned his rank, and because D1 was to lead the crusade party when they were to leave, she would remember her. B1 combed through detail after detail. The logistics were exhausting. Plume waited for instructions that would pertain to her specifically, but it took a while for B1 to circle back. Master Plume, you will march in the front lines with D1 and our navigator. According to our reports, the Veteranese guide is wildly incompetent and to blame for the Crusade's delayed arrival. Master Watercress will likewise be close to the front. Master Tempest will be a few lines back, as will Master Zenith and Master Azimuth. There's no reason to risk weather or transportation mages in the front lines, especially after the loss of Master Radius and Gia. Plume doubted B1 meant to be offensive, but it came off as though he was willing to sacrifice his healing and combative mages. Still, Plume could protect herself, and she liked to think B1 meant to convey that sentiment instead. B1 continued, Mages, we'll supply the weather-enchanted tents and packs of supplies for you, but you'll need to provide your own clothing. We recommend that whatever robes you bring, you ensure they're also weather-resistant. Plume tuned out again until B1 mentioned something useful. Between important snippets, Plume tried to catch Ether's attention, but it hadn't drifted to her once. It never left B1. He had never paid such close attention in meetings before when it hadn't directly involved him. She speculated he still planned on attending the crusade, even though he told her he didn't. Does he intend to join us in secret? Does he think that would work? It would be evident if a spawn, especially the Archspawn, were to march in the crusade party. He'd be spotted immediately. Every citizen of Coserai knows his face, and he'd be returned to the impenetrable castle just as quickly. Master Zenith wouldn't hesitate for a moment to do so. We have information that the Vahantri were picking off soldiers earlier in the crusade and may do so again. Thanks to Master Yarrow, we're considering they might be marching with the crusade itself. So be cautious. Any soldier may be acting on behalf of the Vahantri. Trust no one, especially those from other regional armies. It was said that the Vahantri were stealing the armor from the soldiers. They may disguise themselves as their victims. Do not share this with anyone or speak of it beyond these confines. We do not want the Vahantri to know that we have our guard up against them, or else they may switch to a new, unanticipated tactic. How did Yarrow discover that? Does he run errands for Panite as I do? More importantly, the possibility of traitorous soldiers shook Plume. There would be close to 10,000 soldiers in the crusade party when they departed from Athlia. Any one of them could be a threat. It didn't only shake her, it terrified her. At least she could trust her fellow mages. She doubted a member of the Vahantri could impersonate any of the renowned masters. Whomever they trusted, she would then also trust. The same would go for D1's contacts in the front lines. The 3,000 new Khazarish additions should also be safe. As she realized she should trust those marching in her closest proximity, she relaxed. The worst she could face would be a dagger in the night, but she could establish a protective barrier around her tent to prevent that. Her confidence grew that she would be okay. At the end of the session, she caught up with Ether. Would you have time to spend together in the library tonight? Certainly. It has been a while. Have you been? She asked as they descended the winding stairs around the exterior of the High King's Tower and headed toward the library. I've been well, and you? Parchment came looking for you, saying he hasn't seen you anywhere. I'm fine. Parchment did find me, but thank you for relaying the message. I told him I wanted to regain my bearings. Are you feeling better now? I am. It gave me time to catch up on a few overdue tasks other than mental healing. Like what? He asked as they headed up the stairs to the library. I read your favorite text. What did you think of it? I liked it. I wanted to discuss some of its ideas with you. I wanted to know what your favorite part was. Off the top of my head, I don't know if I have one. You won't give me anything to work with? I'm trying to reach out here. Why don't we start with yours? Because I want your opinion. You've been so overly reliant on my thoughts when we've been spending time together recently. You are your own person, and I want to see him again. I miss that Ether. He stared at her for a long moment. I liked all of it. That's why it's my favorite. You can be more specific. The beginning captivated me the most. Probably why I bothered to finish it. He joked lightly, and his wings puffed away carelessly. Plume hadn't appreciated the attempt at humor. She was still annoyed he had never finished the defensive spell tome, and her disapproval rested on her face. I apologize if I've upset you, Plume. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Let's just talk about the journal. Of course. What about the beginning did you like? You could feel the author's honesty flowing into the page, a kind that's uncommon these days. Do you mean when she's talking about why one spawn might supersede judgment over an individual that's come into contact with more than one spawn in their lifetime? Yes. Chalaja's interpretations were intriguing. By arguing the spawn who knew the soul better in life was to judge the person in death, rather than just which of the spawn had locked eyes with a human first, it asks, what is the purpose of the spawn's decision? If it were rigid and followed established rules, such that a person was to be judged by the last spawn to look in their eyes before death, it's arguable that nothing more is going on. It would just be how death works. But her argument that a spawn may judge those they are closest to introduces sentimentality into the process. Perhaps there is some form beyond the spawn that controls the system we function in and has empathy for humanity. Perhaps it's its own rigid rule over itself, and I believe it must serve some higher purpose because I, too, am sentimental. But I found it fascinating. Plume wondered why he considered the philosophy to be honest or genuine, but she wouldn't spark an argument. She was merely pleased to engage in meaningful conversation with her good friend once more. Even though B1 had claimed that almost everything would be provided for the mages, Plume stocked up on a few extra items. Before anything, she had Master Tempest enchant the robes she had been sainted in. The weatherproofing magic alone was more expensive than her mirror, and if she had known the expense was coming, she would have held off on purchasing the ornate furniture item. With her meager leftover earnings, Plume bought a traveling water skin and a few other conveniences for the road, mostly non-perishable snacks like dried meat, seeds, nuts, and sweets preserved in Ikashuish honey. She bought extra pairs of undershirts and underpants. She detested putting on still damp, sweaty shirts or pants, so she ensured she'd have enough pairs between washing sessions. She bought extra cloths and rags. They were always necessary for something. With the cloths, she could bundle her snacks, and she'd need the rags for her cycle. She bought a map, just in case. She wasn't adept at reading them, and she had never taken an astronomy or navigation class, but she could figure out how to traverse a road, forking in opposite directions. In her preparations for the crusade party's arrival, she squeezed in the long-awaited promised performance for the servants. She juggled her little fireballs, making artistic displays with them, and then with grander flames of varying colors ranging from white to yellow to orange to red to blue. After the performance, she ensured Tim had succeeded in learning her tome and could take over supporting the massive weight of the High King's tower. He performed the spell flawlessly, and she left the responsibility to him. She also gave him a couple pointers on casting fireballs on her way out. During a High Council meeting, the High King mentioned several issues of great importance, the first of which concerned maintaining the health and security of major trading routes. All the towns situated off the Arid Isle had suffered from the Bahantry attacks on Sylvain's regional soldiers, and the resulting economic impact was crippling the northern kingdoms. Bavadian logs no longer moved to the Rysik printing presses. Sylvani fig farmers had stopped exchanging their crops with Wojetan mulberry harvesters, and large trading caravans avoided the entire region. The next issue regarded preventing political divides within the Crusade Party and keeping morale high whenever possible. The prior attacks and perilous conditions had apparently placed a strain on the integrated armies. Plume doubted she could influence the economic concerns, but she could boost morale on occasion. She bought additional magic powder from the castle's alchemic mages to spruce up the nights with a colorful fire demonstration. In addition to performing her standard duties, Plume had intended to return to the forest and report to Panite once more before the crusade arrived, but preparing to leave preoccupied all her free time. The last time she had reported, there hadn't been anything too strange or unusual going on in the village. That would have to do, since Plume didn't have a chance to further investigate the tunnels or the magical priest, and she didn't want to give the High King a reason to pursue the forest folk if there was no reason to. However, she resolved to answer the mystery when she returned from the crusade. Plume spent her last day and night authoring the tome with Yarrow. His input was minimally helpful. She had already read his research and collected his relevant knowledge regarding the underlying neurobiology. By then, she could have authored the tome alone. If Yarrow hadn't provided invaluable insights early in the process, she likely would have. But he had helped her, so she'd let him feel useful. According to Yarrow's pristine silver clock, it was third moon high, and she knew she had overstayed her welcome. Yarrow tapped his fingernails along the side of his desk impatiently. Until he forced her out, she'd stay. She wanted to complete the tome so the ordeal could be over with. Hostility had radiated from Yarrow since she'd received her new titles, and she wished to cease their contact. Upon returning from the crusade, she intended to revisit his office as infrequently as possible. Sacred words dragged from her quill across the parchment, but they didn't come fast enough. Overall, the holy language condensed the common tongue effectively, but she still had too much to do. I shouldn't have wasted those spare days reading Ether's favorite literature if he didn't even care. I should have finished this instead. In thought, she paused her writing. Yarrow tapped faster. She continued until she finished. Done then? His posture straightened. Yes, finally. It still hasn't been tested, but it should work. It has the complete instructions on how to perform construction repairs through another architectural mage's barrier. The language, the feelings, the biomechanics, the barrier physics, it's all there. Good. I'll have it posted to the Mages College in the morning. In confusion, she frowned. There's just the one copy. We should leave it here so when I return I can compose at least another 2, if not more than that. Once I've sent those copies to the architectural mages who need them, then we can transport it to the college. He stiffened. If another mage wishes to purchase a copy, they can hire a scribe from the college. That's how tomes are produced. It costs a fortune to hire a scribe. I can do it in my spare time for free. We'd know the royalties would be divided evenly if it was prepared through the college. I'm not charging for the tome. Monrides' dome castle requires repairs, as does Hyeri's thorn castle. You couldn't possibly just give it away. What would be the point? To spread knowledge. What would be the point in hiding it? To earn gem. This tome would benefit wizard mages. Their salaries are substantially less than sorcerers. You would deny them a revolutionary tool that would cost them perhaps a rotation's wages, effectively preventing required upgrades, and by extension risking the respective populations just to increase the weight of your own gem pouch. Yes. Outraged, she pounded her fist on the wooden surface between them. Something jolted inside Yarrow's desk and screamed. What is that? She asked. My rabbit. He pulled open a deep drawer. Your rabbit? She pushed up onto the chair's arm to see. Her name is 59. Why is 59 in your desk? Blood stained the whimpering winter rabbit's fur. The cage had 24 metal spikes screwed in to surround the rabbit's body. If the rabbit moved, she would be impaled, and she had been in the front of her shoulder, her cheek, and her back thigh. Why is she in this torturous contraption? Plume demanded. He waved casually. I find it disturbing when she scampers around the desk without a cage. Besides, it's easier to clean the mess when it's confined to a specific area. This is cruel. You have to see that. Plume flicked her eyes between the rabbit and the maniac. I'll heal her once you leave. This is no way to treat a living creature. She can't even turn around, Yarrow. He rose. See yourself out of my office. I will keep the tome here, and we can discuss arrangements later. But it is late, and I wish to retire so I may tend to my pet. If I do not, she'll rip herself free and become impaled again. Plume wanted to take the cage from his hands and free the suffering animal in the white dogwood forest. But any sudden movement would harm 59. She wanted to turn the metal cage intangible to free the rabbit, but doing so might cause her to bleed out and die. I can't do anything to help her. I must leave her with Yarrow. Plume tore her eyes from the piteous rabbit to face him. Fine, but when I return, there will be a change of arrangements. When Plume retired to her room, she was still too wired to sleep. Between her fight with Yarrow and the impending departure of the crusade, she doubted she'd rest before Ackle rose. She distracted herself with other topics. Emerald robes and sweaty tunics littered her floor, but she had no energy to clean them up. She looked to the mirror again. Has anything changed? Do I look healthier than the previous time I stared at the silver glass? She considered what Wrench had said about the elite of the castle, about the masks of illusion. There is truth to the words. There are plenty of self-aggrandizing mages, nobles, and royals. They wear masks of illusion, acting more importantly than they are. The real question is, have I adorned one? As powerful as I think I am, I couldn't save a rabbit. She cast the protective barrier spell around her mind for a heartbeat to see if she viewed herself properly, to check if she had unconsciously created a guise for herself. Once she cast her spell, the reflection remained constant, but a dark essence enveloped the mirror's wooden border. She nearly shrieked. The emanating ripples of darkness didn't do anything, just existed. In fear, she shot fire at the shadows and burned the wooden frame until the mirror's glass fell and smashed onto the dresser. As the shards splintered, she threw up a defensive barrier to avoid getting skewered. When she turned to glance back at the frame, it had all but disintegrated, and the sharp silver fragments surrounding her bore no sign of the dark ripples. What was that darkness? A curse? Had admonition done it? Had Yarrow? Was it Crockett or Gable? Was it the work of the forest folk? She would never know now. But she knew one truth. When she returned from the crusade, she would uncover every secret in the kingdom of Coserai.